Alright, episode 35, back to Shadowfang Keep. That's how he spent his mornings. Still, he was very diligent in his official duties, including protecting the city. Even the deified Augustus trusted him with the secret orders when he made him governor of Thrace. He so conquered that country. Tiberius also trusted him when he took a vacation in Campania, leaving behind many critical issues that stirred up both suspicion and hatred. I think that since Caesar's drunkenness worked out well for the emperor, Tiberius then appointed Crassus, a man of authority and good sense, but so soaked in drunk that once at a Senate meeting after a banquet, he fell into a deep sleep that no one could wake him from, and he had to be carried home. It was to this man that Tiberius sent many orders, written in his own hand, orders he didn't trust even to his household officials. Crassus never let a single secret slip, whether personal or public. So let's get rid of speeches like this. No man under the influence of alcohol has control over his soul. Just as new wine does the vats and the dregs rise to themselves from the strength of fermentation, so when wine ferments in a person, whatever lies hidden inside is brought up and exposed. Just as a man overcome by drink can't keep his food down after drinking too much, he also can't keep a secret. He spills out both his own secrets and those of others. This is what usually happens, but so does this. We discuss serious matters with people who we know drink heavily. So the argument made in defense of Zeno's logic is false, as secrets aren't trusted to habitual drunkards. How much better is it to criticize drunkenness directly and expose its vices? Even the average good person avoids them, not to mention the perfect sage, who is satisfied with quenching his thirst. The sage, even if he occasionally gets carried away by good company, always stops short of getting drunk. We'll talk later about whether a wise man's mind is affected by too much wine and if it leads him to act foolishly like a drunk. But for now, if you want to prove that a good man shouldn't get drunk, why use logic? Show how shameful it is to drink more than you can handle and not know your own limits. Show how often the drunkard does things that make him ashamed when he's sober. Say that drunkenness is just a state of insanity that we willingly bring on ourselves. Extend the drunkard's stay for several days, and what you doubt it's madness. Even as it is, the madness isn't any less. It just doesn't last long. Think of Alexander the Great, who stabbed Clydius, his dearest and most loyal friend. At a banquet, after realizing what he'd done, Alexander wanted to die, and he certainly should have. Drunkenness brings out and reveals every kind of vice and removes the sense of shame that hides our evil actions. More people avoid doing wrong because they're ashamed of it than because they have good intentions. When the strength of wine takes over and controls the mind, every hidden evil comes out. Drunkenness doesn't create vice, it just brings it to light. The lustful man doesn't even wait for the privacy of a bedroom. Without delay, he gives in to his desires. The unchaste man publicly shows his sickness. The ill-tempered person doesn't hold back his words or his hands. The arrogant man becomes more arrogant. The cruel man more ruthless. The slanderer more spiteful. Every vice is unleashed and comes to the forefront. Besides, we forget who we are. Our words become slurred and poorly spoken. Our gaze becomes unsteady, our steps falter, our head spins, and the ceiling seems to move around as if a storm was shaking the whole house. Our stomachs ache when the wine causes gas, makes our insides swell. At the time, these problems can be endured as long as the person still has some natural strength left. But what can he do when sleep wakens him and drunkenness turns into indigestion? Think of the disasters caused by drunkenness in entire nations. This evil has betrayed the most spirited and warlike races to their enemies. It has breached walls defended by years of hard fighting. It has forced once unyielding and defiant people to submit to foreign rule. This evil has defeated in a wine cup those who were invincible on the battlefield. Alexander, whom I just mentioned, survived many long marches, battles, and winter campaigns, which he endured by overcoming the disadvantages of time and place, crossing many rivers from unknown sources and many seas, all for but excessive drinking took him down, along with the infamous death-dealing cup of Hercules. What glory is there in holding your liquor when you've won the prize, and the other drinkers are either passed out or vomiting, unable to keep up with your challenge to drink more? When you're the last one standing at the party, when you've outdrunk everyone else, winding yourself. One thing you'll learn about South Shore is that we have some of the best cuisine north of Stormwind. My basically recipe for turtle is remarkable. I've known folks to travel from as far as Darkness to enjoy foreign customs and unlearned vices. His no drunkenness and just as potent as wine, his love for Cleopatra. This made him an enemy of the state. This made him no match for his equals. This made him cruel, as he sat at the table with the heads of state leaders brought in, identifying their faces and hands among the most elaborate feasts and royal luxuries after having prescribed them. Even though he was heavy with wine, he still thirsted for blood. It was bad enough that he got drunk while doing these things. How much worse that he did them while actually drunk. Cruelty often follows drinking because a man's sound mind is corrupted and is savage, just as a lingering illness makes people irritable and drives them wild with slightest frustration. Everyone will be so frequent bouts of drunkenness and realize the soul, and people often lose control of themselves. The habit of madness lingers, and license that alcohol stirs out remain and act out for story. So, the truth and the haunting evils of drunkenness and facts, not just words. Do the simplest of all. Show that what people call pleasures become punishments once they go beyond their limits. If you try to prove that the wise man can drink too much wine and still stay on course even though he's drunk, you might as well try to prove with logic that he won't die if he swallows poison, that he won't sleep if he takes a sleeping pill, that he won't vomit and expel what clogs his stomach when you give him hellebore. When a man speaks stumble and his speech is slurred, what reason do you have to believe that he's half sober and half drunk? Farewell. Letter 84. On gathering ideas. The trips you mentioned, trips that shake the laziness out of me, I consider them good for both my health and my studies. You see how they benefit my health, because my love for reading makes me lazy and neglectful of my body. I can get some exercise while traveling. As for my studies, I'll explain how these trips help them too. Since I haven't let my reading slip even a little bit, and I believe reading is essential, not only to keep me from being too self-satisfied, but also to learn what others have to say. So I can judge that reading as I think about the new discoveries still to be made. Reading feeds the mind and refreshes it when it gets time to sleep. But remember, this refreshment is impossible without us. We shouldn't focus only on writing or only on reading. If we only write, we'll wear ourselves out and become gloomy. And if we only read, we'll become weak and unity. It's better to switch between and combine both, so the things we learn from reading can be solidified. People say we should follow the example of bees, who fly around and gather the flowers they need to make honey, and then store and organize everything they've collected. These bees, as our poet Virgil says, pack the flowing honey tight and fill their hives with sweet nectar. It's not clear whether the juice they collect from flowers is the returns of the honey, or if the bees change what they gather the honey by mixing it with something from themselves or if it has special quality. Some experts believe that bees have actually actually make honey, they just gather it. They say that in India, honey has been found on the leaves of certain reeds, created either by the unique dew in that region or by the roots juice, which is unusually sweet and rich. They also say that a similar quality exists in our grass, though it's less obvious. A creature born to do this job could find it and collect it. Others believe that the bees take away what they've gathered from the delicate flowers and plants and turn it into honey through careful storing and preserving. Helped by something like fermentation, the plants come together to form one substance. But I shouldn't get into it. I believe we should follow the rules. Example 2. The carefully sift through everything we've gathered from a wide range of reading. These ideas are better preserved if they're kept separate at first. Then using the special abilities nature has given us our natural talents, we should blend these different ideas into one delicious mixture. Even though it might show where it came from, it should still be clearly different from its original sources. This is what we see nature doing in our own bodies without us even trying. Food we eat, as long as it stays in its original form and floats in our stomachs as an undigested mass, is a burden, but it turns into tissue and blood only after it's changed from its original form. It's the same with the food that nourishes our minds. We need to make sure that what we've absorbed doesn't stay the same, or it won't truly become a part of us. We must digest it, otherwise it will just stay in our memory and won't reach our reasoning power. Let's fully absorb these ideas and make them our own, so that something will be reminded created from many different elements. Just like how a single element is formed from several smaller elements, we have them all. This is what our mind should do. It should hide away all the pieces that help it, and reveal only what it has made from them. Even if you end up resembling the person you admire deeply, I want you to resemble him as a child resembles his father, not as a picture resembles its original, because a picture is a lifeless thing. You might ask, won't it be obvious whose style, reasoning, or clever sayings you're imitating? I think that sometimes it's impossible to tell who is being imitated if the copy is truly accurate. A true copy leaves its own mark on all features that it takes from the original, blending them into one unified whole. Don't you see how many voices there are in a choir? Yet out of the many voices we can only hear one sound. In that choir, one voice sings the high notes, another the low, and another the mid range. There are women's voices too, mixed with the men's, and the flute plays along with them. In that choir, the individual singers' voices are hidden. What we hear is the combined voice of all. Of course, I'm talking about the king. Of course, I'm talking about the king of choir, the old philosophers knew. In our modern performances, we have more singers than there used to be spectators in the theatre of old. The allies are filled with rows of singers, brass instruments surround the auditorium, the stage echoes with the flutes and other instruments of every kind, and yet from all these different sounds, a harmony is produced. I want my mind to be like this, equipped with many skills, many teachings, and examples of conduct taken from many periods in history, but all blending together harmoniously into one. How can this be done, you ask? By constant effort and by doing nothing without the approval of reason. If you're willing to listen to reason, it will tell you, give up the pursuits that have made you run around aimlessly. Give up wealth, which is neither a danger nor a burden to those who have it. Give up the pleasures of the body and the mind. They only soften and weaken you. Give up your quest for power. It's an inflated, idle, and empty pursuit with no real goal, as worried about being overtaken as it is. About having no one following. It's plagued by envy, actually by double envy, and we see how this will be when someone who is envied also feels envy himself. Do you see those grand houses with crowds of people making noises as they pay their respects? They'll insult you as you enter the door, and even more after you've entered. Avoid the steps that lead to rich men's homes, and the porches made dangerous by the because there you'll be standing not just on the edge of a cliff, but also on slippery ground. Instead, steer yourself toward wisdom and follow her ways, which offer true peace and happiness. Whatever seems important in human affairs, no matter how small it really is, and only pride by comparison to the lowest things, can only be reached by a difficult and tiring path. It's a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness, but if you want to reach its peak, which lies far above the reach of fortune, you'll look down on everything, and that people consider lofty. But even so, you can reach the top by traveling on level ground. Farewell. Letter 85. On some phase syllogisms. I was planning to go easy on you and avoid discussing some of the more difficult topics. I was satisfied just to give you a small sample of the views held by our Stoic school, which believes that virtue alone is enough to live a happy life. But now you ask me to include all of our logical arguments of those made by other schools that try to diminish us. If I were to do that, it would result in a book instead of a letter. And I must say again and again that I do not enjoy these kinds of debates. I feel embarrassed to step into the arena and defend such important ideas with such weak tools. Here's an example. A person who is wise is also self-controlled. A self-controlled person is steady. A steady person is untroubled. Someone who is untroubled is free from sadness, and someone who is free from sadness is happy. Therefore, a wise person is happy, and wisdom is enough to live a happy life. Some of the Peripatetics, followers of Aristotle, respond to this argument by saying
that words like untroubled, steady, and free from sadness should be understood to mean that someone is rarely troubled, and only a little bit, not that they are never troubled. Similarly, they say that someone is called free from sadness if they don't often feel sad, or if their sadness is not too strong. They argue that it's not natural for a person to be completely free from sadness, or that the wise person is not overwhelmed by grief but only touched by it. And they present other arguments along these lines, all based on the school's teachings. They do not eliminate the passions. This way, they only reduce them. But how insignificant is the most cowardly? A little happier than the most miserable, a little more self-controlled than the most out of control, and a little greater than the lowest. Would a runner boast about his speed by comparing himself to those who can barely walk? This is what true speed looks like, not the kind that earns praise by being compared to what is slowest. Would you call a person healthy who only has a mild fever? No, because good health does not mean being just a little sick. They say the wise person is called untroubled in the same way that breakthrough is called another. Not that there is no firmness at all, but that the firmness is less than before. That idea is incorrect because I am not talking about gradually reducing the bad feelings of a good person, but about completely eliminating them. There should be no bad feelings in the smallness. If there are any, they will grow As they grow, they will hinder the woods, just as a large and complete cataract, a cloudy area in the eye, can make someone completely blind. Even a medium-sized cataract can. If, by your definition, the wise person has any passions at all, or reason will not be strong enough to control them, and they will be carried away, as if by a strong current, especially if you give them not just one passion to wrestle with, but all their passions. And a group of even moderate passions can affect the person more than a single powerful passion. The person has a desire for money, although only a little bit. They have ambition, but it's not fully awakened. They have a temper, but it cannot be calmed down. They are inconsistent, but not extremely so. They have lust, but not in a strong way. We would rather deal with someone who has one fully developed vice than with someone who has all the vices, but none of them in extreme form. Again, it doesn't matter how strong the passion is, no matter its size. It doesn't listen to reason and doesn't welcome advice. Just like no animal in the wild will take obeys reason, since nature made it unable to understand advice. Passions don't follow reason, no matter how small. Tigers and lions never lose their wildness. They might calm down for a while, but when least expected, their softened fierceness can turn into madness. Vices are never truly tame. Again, if reason prevails, the passions won't even start. But if they start against the will of reason, they will maintain themselves against the will of reason. It's easier to stop them in the beginning than to control them once they gain strength. This halfway approach is misleading and useless. It's like saying that we should be moderately insane or moderately sick. Only virtue has moderation. The evils that afflict the mind do not allow for moderation. It's easier to remove them entirely than to control them. Can anyone doubt the vices of the human mind? They have become chronic and evil, which we call diseases of the uncontrolled by greed, cruelty, and emptiness. The same applies to passions because they are vices. Again, if you allow sadness, fear, desire, and all other wrong impulses, they will no longer be within our control. And why? Simply because the causes that stir them up are uncontrolled. They will increase in proportion to the size and closeness of the causes that draw them. Fear will grow if the fingers and terror seems to ensure closer and desire more strong. The existence of the passions is beyond our control, so is the extent of their power. Once they start, they will grow and their causes have become as strong as they will. No matter how small these vices are, they will be larger. Anything harmful never stays within limits, no matter how small it is. It can spread quickly, and sometimes even a slight worsening of a disease can bring down what we can bear. But how foolish it is to believe that we can control the end of something when its beginnings are beyond our control. How can I bring something to an end if I didn't have the power to stop it?
I am finally free from this
It's
cell.
easier
The
to
Q
keep something
sent me
out
from
than to
Dalaran to
control
investigate
what's
Aruga's
inside.
progress with the
Some
undead here in
people make a
Silverpine
distinction
Forest.
like this.
Little did we
If a
know that the
person has
wizards had lost
self-control
his
and
grasp on
wisdom,
sanity.
they are
I must
indeed at
report this
peace
mess
in
at
mind and
once, but
habits,
before
but
I leave,
not in the
allow me
times
to
of the
undo the
outcomes.
magical lock on the courtyard
For
door.
as far
You
as the
can see
mind is
Rental
concerned,
Door
they are not
has
troubled,
survive
sad, or
my
afraid.
speed.
There are many external causes that can disturb them. What they mean is this: so-and-so is not naturally an angry person, but sometimes they do get angry. Or they are not naturally fearful, but sometimes they do experience fear. In other words, they are far from the fault, but not from the passion of fear. However, if fear is allowed to enter, it will eventually turn into a vice, and anger, once admitted into the mind, will change the previous habit of a mind that was once free. Besides, if the wise person, instead of ignoring all external causes, ever feels anything, when the time comes for them to face a spiritual flames or other dangers for the sake of their control, laws of freedom, they will do so reluctantly and with a weakened spirit. Such inconsistency of mind is not free from principles. Then again, we should make sure that two ideas that should be tested separately are not refused. The conclusion that only what is honorable is true is reached independently of the conclusion that virtue alone is enough for a happy life. Only what is honorable is honorable. Everyone believes that virtue is enough for a happy life. But on the other hand, if virtue alone does not necessarily follow. Philosophers like Seneca and Stoicism believe that a person can be happy through virtue. They do not think that a label is not possible. Epicurus also says that a person with virtue is happy. He argues that virtue alone is not enough for a happy life because it is the pleasure that comes from virtue, not virtue itself that makes one happy. This distinction is pointless because the same philosopher also says that virtue never exists without pleasure. Therefore, if virtue always comes with pleasure and is inseparable from it, then virtue is enough on its own. For virtue brings pleasure with it and does not exist without it, even when it is by itself. But it is absurd to say that a person will be happy through virtue alone, yet not completely happy. I cannot see how that can be, since the happy life contains a good that is perfect and cannot be surpassed. If a person has this good, their life is fully happy. Now if the life of the gods contains nothing greater or better, and the happy life is divine, and there is no higher level to which a person can go. Also, if the happy life lacks nothing, then every happy life is perfect. It is happy and at the same time the happiest. Do you have any doubt that the happy life is the supreme good? Therefore, if it possesses the supreme good, it is supremely happy. Just as the supreme good cannot be increased, what can be greater than the supreme? The happy life cannot be increased either. It is not without the supreme. If you say that one person is happier than another, you are also saying that someone can be much happier, which means making countless distinctions in the supreme good. But I understand the supreme good to be that which allows one free of itself. If one person is less happy than another, it follows that they would prefer the life of another, happier person over their own. But the happy person prefers no other life to their own. Either of these two things is unbelievable. If there should be anything left for the happy person to wish for more than they have, that they would not prefer what is better than what they hold. For certainly, the wiser a person is, the more they will strive for the best and the desire to achieve it possible. How can someone be happy if they still need, or rather are still bound to crave something else? I will tell you where this mistake comes from. People do not understand that the happy life is a single, unified thing. It is its quality, not its quantity, that makes such a life the highest form of existence. Therefore, there is complete equality between a long life and a short life, between a life that spreads out in many directions and one that is focused on a single goal. Those who measure life by number, size, or parts take away what makes it unique. Now, what is the unique feature of a happy life? It is fullness. I think that satiety, the feeling of being full, is the to A eats more, B eats less. What difference does it make? Both are now satisfied. Or A drinks more and B drinks less. What difference does it make? Both are no longer thirsty. Similarly, A lives for many years and B for fewer. It does not matter as long as A's many years bring as much happiness as B's few years. The person you claim is less happy is not happy at all, but happy does not allow for degrees. He who is brave is fearless. He who is fearless is free from sadness. He who is free from sadness is happy. The Stoic school created this argument, and those who try to refute it say that we Stoics assume a premise that is false and highly contested, and the brave person is fearless. They say that the brave person have no fear of the dangers they face. That would be the condition of a brave person. The brave person will, it's true, feel fear only a little, but they are not completely free from fear. Now, those who argue this way are falling back on their own reason and treating vices in lesser degrees as if they were virtues. For indeed, the person who does feel fear, even if it is rare and slight, is not free from wickedness, but is only troubled by it to a lesser extent. Not so, they reply, for I believe that a person is mad if they do not fear real dangers. What you say is true if the dangers are real evils, but if the person knows they aren't evils and believes them, The only evil is moral basis. They will have to face their constant anxiety and despise things that others cannot help fearing. Or if it is characteristic of a fool or a madman not to fear evils, then the wiser a person is, the more they will fear such things. So, they argue, the Stoics believe that a brave person will expose themselves to dangers. By no means, they will simply not fear them. Although they will avoid them, it is right for them to be careful and not fearful. What then should I not fear death? Is it not burning and threats of fortune? Not at all, because they know that these are not evils but sins. They consider all these things to be mere nightmares that trouble their minds. Paint a picture of slavery, whips, chains, poverty, mutilation by disease or torture, or any other fearsome thing. A brave person will see these as terrifying only to those who are afraid. Do you think that something is truly evil and they choose to face it willingly? What then, you ask, is truly evil? It is yielding to those things that are falsely called evils, and surrendering our freedom to them when we should suffer death to keep our freedom. Freedom is lost unless we learn to despise those things that try to deceive us. If people understood what bravery is, they would have no doubts about how brave a person should behave. Bravery is not thoughtless rashness, love of danger, or seeking out frightening things. It is the knowledge that helps us distinguish between what is evil and what is not. Bravery takes the greatest care of itself and endures with the greatest patience all things that falsely appear to be evil. What then, you ask, if the sword is held over your brave man's neck, if he is continually wounded, if he sees his intestines in his lap, if he is tortured again and he breaks, and feels no pain intensely, and if the blood flows afresh from his wounds, he has no fear, would you say he feels no pain either? Yes, he feels pain, because no human virtue can eliminate feelings. But he does not fear, he remains unconquered, looking down on his sufferings from a high place. Do you want to know what spirit animates him in these moments? It is the spirit of someone comforting a sick friend. That which is evil causes harm. That which causes harm makes a person worse. Pain and conflict make a person worse. Therefore, they are not evils. Your argument says the critic is wrong because not everything that causes harm necessarily makes someone worse. A storm and squall cause harm to a sailor, but they do not make him a worse sailor. Some Stoics respond to this by saying the sailor does become worse because of the storm or squall, as he cannot accomplish his goal and hold his course. In terms of his skill, he is not worse, but in his work, he is worse. To this, the Peripatetics respond. Therefore, poverty will make even the wise person worse, as will pain or any other similar thing. Although these things won't take away his virtue, they will hinder its work. This would be correct if it weren't for the fact that the sailor and the wise person are different kinds of people. The wise person's goal in life is not to achieve everything at all costs, but to do everything correctly. The sailor's goal is to bring the ship safely to port at all costs. The arts, like sailing, serve life, wisdom, however, commands life. For myself, I think a different answer should be given. That the sailor's skill is never made worse by a storm, nor is his application of it. The sailor can steward a successful voyage with the skill and practice of his art. That is expert knowledge of steering the ship, and the more he is hindered by fortune, the more his skill becomes apparent. The sailor who could say, never sink this ship except with an even keel, has fulfilled the requirements of his art. The storm does not interfere with his skill, only with his success. What then, you ask, isn't a sailor harmed by something that prevents him from reaching port, frustrates all his efforts, and either drives him out to sea or strands the ship? No, it does not harm him as a sailor, only as a traveler. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a sailor. In fact, it's so far from hindering the skill, it even showcases it. Anyone can steer a ship in calm seas. The proverb says so. His misfortunes disrupt the journey, the skill of the sailor. A The sailor has two roles, one as a passenger like everyone else on the ship, and one as a sailor, which is unique to him. The storm affects him as a passenger and a sailor. Likewise, external circumstances like poverty or pain don't make a wise person less wise. They might limit what he can do for others, but they don't stop him from living wisely. A wise person is always active, even in difficult times. They are at their best when fortune challenges them. Their wisdom benefits both themselves and others, and they are prepared for whatever life throws at them. Just as animal trainers can tame the fiercest creatures, a wise person can tame most challenges like pain, poverty, and disgrace. These are things most people fear, but when these challenges meet a wise person, they become subdued. Farewell. Letter 86. Scipio's Villa. I'm resting at the country house that once belonged to Scipio Afrinicus himself, and I'm writing to you after paying my respects to his spirit and to what I believe might be the tomb of this great warrior. I believe his soul has returned in the skies, like kinfolk, because he led large armies, since even a madman like Cambyses had large armies, but because he showed remarkable self-control and a strong sense of duty. I admire this quality in him even more after he left Rome than when he was defeated. Because he faced a difficult choice, either Scipio should stay in Rome, or Rome should stay free. Scipio said, I don't want to break our laws or customs in any way. Let all Roman citizens have equal rights. My country, enjoy the good I've done for you. Do it without me. I've been the reason for your freedom, and I'll also be the proof of it. I'll go into exile if I've become more than what is good for you. How can I not admire his greatness, which led him to leave voluntarily and relieve the state of its burden? Things had reached the point where either freedom would harm Scipio or Scipio would harm freedom. Either of those outcomes would have been right in the eyes of the gods. So Scipio stepped aside and moved to Lytton, making the stake just as much in his debt for his exile as it was for the exile of Hannibal. I've looked around the house, which is made of cut stone.
Robert, what are you doing? Come in
Enclosing
here.
the forest, towers build outwards on both sides.
What are you
to defend the
taping?
house. A well hidden among buildings and trees that's big enough to supply an entire colony. And a small bath buried in darkness, just like they used to be in the old days. Our ancestors
I'll
didn't
help
think
you.
you could have a hot bath unless it was dark. It was a great pleasure for me to compare Scipio's way of living with our own. Imagine in this tiny space the terror of Carthage. The man Rome should thank for not being captured more than once, used to bathe his body after working in the fields. Scipio was used to keeping himself busy and working the land with his own hands, just like the good old Romans used to do. Under this symbol, he stood, and this flame floor supported his weight. Who today could bear to bathe like that? We think we're poor and lonely if our walls aren't decorated with large, expensive mirrors, if our marble from Alexandria isn't surrounded by mosaics made from Numidian stone, if their borders aren't covered with intricate patterns arranged in many colors and patterns, if our vaulted ceilings aren't covered in glass, if our swimming pools aren't lined with Thasian marble, which used to be a rare and wonderful sight in any temple, pools into which we lower ourselves after sweating heavily, and finally, if the water doesn't pour out from silver taps. So far, I've been talking about ordinary baths. What should I say about those owned by freedmen? A vast number of statues, of columns that don't support anything but are there just for decoration, just to spend money. And what huge amounts of water that flows down from one level to another. We've become so luxurious that we won't even walk on anything but precious stones. In Scipio's bath, there are tiny slits. You can't really close the windows, so cut out of the stone walls and let light in without weakening the structure. But nowadays, people think baths are only good enough for moths if they aren't arranged to get sunlight by day windows. If men can't bathe and get a tan at the same time, if they can't look out from their baths over stretches of land and sea, that's how it goes. Baths that used to draw crowds and admiration when they were first opened are now avoided and considered old-fashioned as soon as luxury comes into its idea, which would eventually lead to its downfall. In the early days, though, there were only a few baths, and they weren't decorated in any fancy way. Why would people decorate something that cost just a penny and was invented for use, not for pleasure? In those days, bathers didn't have water poured over them. and it didn't always run fresh as if from a hot spring. They didn't care if the water they washed the dirt off in was perfectly clean. How delightful it is to enter that dark bath with a plain roof, knowing that your hero Cato, as Aedan, or Fabius Maximus, or one of the Cornelii, had heated the water with his own hands. For it used to be the duty of the highest-ranking Aedans to enter the public baths and demand that they be cleaned and heated to the temperature needed for use in heaven. The blazing heat is fashionable today, so hot that a slave condemned on some crime ought to be buried alive. It seems to me that nowadays there's no difference between saying the bath is on fire and the bath is warm. Some people today might look down on Scipio as unsophisticated because he didn't let sunlight into his steam room through wide windows or didn't roast in the strong sunlight and lounge around until he could stew in the hot water. Poor fool, they might say. He didn't know how to live. He didn't bathe in filtered water. It was often cloudy and after heavy rains almost muddy. But it didn't matter much to Scipio if he had to bathe like that. He went there to wash off sweat, not waste. I think some people might say in response, they might say, I don't envy Scipio, that it was really an exile's life, to put up with baths like those. Friend, if you were wiser, you'd know that Scipio didn't bathe every day. It's reported by those who have passed down the old ways of Rome that the Romans only washed their arms and legs daily because those were the parts that got dirty during their daily work. And they bathed their whole bodies only once a week. Someone might respond, yeah, they might have been pretty dirty guys. How they must have smelled, but they smelled of the camp, the farm, and heroism. Now that fancy baths have been invented, people are actually dirtier than they were before. What does Horatius Flaccus say when he wants to describe a scoundrel, someone known for his extreme luxury? He says, Bustychilz smells of perfume. Show me a Bustychilz these days and he'd actually smell like a goat. He'd take the place of Gargonius, and Horus compared to him in the same passage. Nowadays, it's not enough to use ointment unless you put on a fresh coat 2 or 3 times a day to keep it from evaporating from your skin. Why should a person brag about this perfume as if it were known? What I'm saying seems too pessimistic to me. Blame it on Scipio's country house where I learned a lesson from Aetialus, a very careful landowner and now the owner of this estate. He taught me that a tree can be transplanted no matter how old it is. We old men need to learn this lesson because none of us are planting an olive grove for ourselves. We're doing it for those who will come after us. I've seen them bear fruit in due time after 3 or 4 years of producing nothing. And you too shall be shaded by a tree that grows slowly but brings comfort to your grandchildren in the years to come, as our poet Virgil says. But Virgil wasn't trying to be perfectly accurate. He wanted to write what sounded best, or what was closest to the truth. For example, leaving aside all his other mistakes, I'll pull up this passage when I notice an error today. In spring, sow beans, and then, oh clever plant, your work will find a crop soil, and millet calls for yearly care. You can judge by this whether these plants should be set out at the same time, or whether they should both be planted in the spring. It's June as I write this, and we're well into July, and just today I've seen farmers harvesting beans and sowing. But to get back to the olive grove, I saw it being planted in 2 ways. If the trees were large, Aetialus would take their trunks and cut off the branches, leaving only about a foot of each branch. He then transplanted them with the root ball after cutting off the roots, leaving only the thick part from which the roots hang. He smeared this with manure and placed it in a hole, not only heaping up the earth around it, but also stamping and pressing it down. He says there's nothing more effective than this packing process because it keeps out the cold and the wind. Besides, the trunk doesn't shake as much, and this packing allows the young roots to grow and take hold in the soil. These roots are still soft and have only a slight grip, so even a little shaking can happen. Aetialus also trims the root before covering it up because he believes that new roots will grow from all the trim parts. Also, the trunk should only stand about 3 or 4 feet above the ground. This way, there will be thick growth from the base, and there won't be a large dry withered stump like in olive groves. The second way he planted was similar. He set out branches that were strong and had soft bark, like those of young saplings. These grow a little more slowly, but since they come from a kind of cutting, they have a smoother and more attractive appearance. Recently, I also saw an oak vine transplanted from its original vineyard. In this case, you should gather the roots together, if possible, and then cover the vine stem more generously so that the roots can even grow from the trunk. I've seen these transplants done not only in February, but even at the very end of March, and the vines took hold of and climbed up for it. But AGL says that all trees with the trunk should be watered with tender water. If we have this resource, we can create our own rain. I won't tell anyone of these tips because, as AGLS did with me, I might be training you to become a recommend. Farewell. Letter 87. Some arguments in favor of the simple life. I was shipwrecked before I even boarded the ship. I won't go into the details of how that happened right now, because you might think it's just another one of those strange Stoic sayings, but whenever you're ready to listen, or even if you're not, I'll prove to you that these words are true, and not as surprising as they first seem. In the meantime, my journey has taught me just how much we own that we don't really need, and how easy it is to give up things when we have to, without fear of their loss. My friend Maximus and I spent 2 very happy days together, taking with us only a few slaves, just one couch load, and no extra stuff except what we were wearing. We slept on mattresses made on the ground with 2 simple beds, one underneath us and one above us. Our meals were simple and took less than an hour to prepare. We always had dried figs with us, as well as writing tablets. If I had bread, I ate the figs with it. If not, I ate the figs on their own. Every day felt like a feast to me because I filled it with good thoughts and a peaceful mind. For the soul is never greater than when it lets go of unnecessary things, finds peace by fearing nothing, and becomes rich by it. The cart I rode in was a simple farmer's cart, and the wheels pulling it only moved enough to show me what. The driver was barefoot, and not because it was summer, but because that's just how he lived. I have to admit it, I was a bit embarrassed for others to think this cart was mine. I'm still a little ashamed to fully embrace the simple life in public. Whenever we meet a more luxurious group of travelers, I can help but blush. This proves that while I approve this way of living, it hasn't completely settled into my heart. If I'm embarrassed by riding in a simple cart, I'd probably boast if I were riding in something fancy. So I'm not quite there yet. I still care too much about what others think of me when I travel. But instead of worrying about that, I should be telling people you're mistaken. You're misled. You admire things. You don't judge people for who they really are. When it comes to money, you calculate very carefully who you should lend money to, do favors for, as if giving a favor is just another transaction. You might say things like he has a lot of land, but he also has a lot of debt. Or he has a fancy house, but it's all out of money. Or no one can show off a better entourage on short notice, but he can't pay his bills. If he pays his creditors, he'll have nothing left. You should figure out the true worth of each person by eliminating You might call a man rich because he travels with gold dishes, owns land in every province, keeps large account books, and has estates so big that people would be envious if they were just wastelands. But after all that, he's still poor. Why? Because he's in debt. How much, you ask? Everything he has. Or maybe you think it matters whether he owes money to another person or to fate. What good are mules dressed up in fancy gear, or chariots decorated with gold and purple, with horses covered in gold and tapestries jumping on gold wings? None of these things make the master any better. Marcus Cato, the censor, who did as much for the state as Scipio did, because while Scipio fought our enemies, Cato fought against our bad habits. He used to ride a simple donkey. This donkey carried not just Cato, but also the saddlebags with all his necessities. Imagine if he met one of today's fancy travelers on the road, with their escorts and luxury attendants. The dandy would probably seem more refined and well-attended compared to Cato, who, even with all simple gear, would be wondering whether to reach for a sword or his hunting. What a time it must have been, when a general who had celebrated a triumph, a censor, and most importantly a Cato, was content with just one simple horse, and not even the whole horse, because the saddlebags took up some of the space. Wouldn't you rather have Cato's worn-out horse than a dandy's whole retinue of fat ponies, Spanish horses, and fast trotters? I can see that this topic could go on forever unless I stop myself. So I'll end here on the topic of these unnecessary things. The man who first called them hindrances must have had a prophetic sense of how they would turn out to go exactly that. Now I'd like to share with you a few logical arguments from our school that deal with the That which is good makes people good. For example, what is good in music makes the musician. Random events don't make a person good, so they aren't goods. The peripatetics and other school of thought respond by saying that this statement is false. People don't always become good just because they have something. In music, for instance, there are good things like a flute or a harp. But these instruments alone don't make a musician. We would reply, you misunderstand what we mean by what is good in music. We're not talking about what equips the musician, but what makes the musician. You're talking about the instruments, not the art itself. If anything in music is truly good, it will always make a musician. I'd like to make this even clearer. We define the good in music in two ways. First, by what helps the musician perform, and second, what helps his art. Musical instruments like flutes and harps help the performance, but they don't create the musician's art. The musician is an artist even without them, though he might not be able to practice his art. But the good in a person is not twofold like this, for the good of a person and the good of life are the same. That which can fall to the lot of any person, no matter how base or despised, is not a good. Wealth can fall to the lot of a planter or a trader of gladiators, so wealth is not good. The peripatetics say this statement is also wrong because we see that good things can fall to the lowest sorts of people, not just in scholarly pursuits, but also in medicine and navigation. However, these arts don't claim to have greatness of soul. They don't rise to any heights or look down on what virtue brings. Virtue, on the other hand, lifts people up and places them above what others value. Virtue doesn't crave too much or fear too much of what is considered good or bad. Gellidan, one of Cleopatra's eunuchs, had great wealth, and recently Lentulus, a man whose speech was as shameless as it was dirty, who did the vilest things with his mouth, was both the heir of many and made many his heirs. What then? Did his wealth make him unclean? Or did he make his wealth unclean? Money sometimes falls into the hands of people like a coin falling into a sewer. Virtue stands above all things. It is valuable and but medicine and navigation don't prevent the practitioners from practicing such things.
Where's the tiara that was in this box?
Good can still be a doctor, a pilot, or a scholar. Just like they can be
All of the
if someone
stuff
has
is
something
torn
that
out
is
from
not
me,
random,
you're gonna get a
a person
whipping.
can easily
You
go
better put
wrong.
all those boxes
Person
away
is
that you
worth
got out.
what they possess. A strong box is only as valuable as what it holds, or rather it's just an accessory to what it holds. Values are fair less for anything other than the money inside. The same goes for owners of large estates. They are just accessories to their possessions. Why then is the wise person great? Because they have a great soul. So it's true that what falls to even the most despicable person is not good. For this reason, I would never consider inactivity a good, because even a tree frog or a flea has that quality. Nor would I consider rest and freedom from trouble a good, because what is more at leisure than a worm? Do you ask what makes a person wise? The same thing that makes a god. You must agree that the wise person has something godlike, heavenly, and grand about them. The good doesn't come to everyone, nor does it let just anyone possess it. Look at how each country has its own special produce. Here, corn grows best, there the vine grows better, and another place, trees and grass grow naturally. See how Tmolus sends out
We
his
survived.
saffron. India, it's ivory.